Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Simone here, and today I have my 2026 reading so far. Obviously, having just restarted my YouTube channel, I haven't done any wrap-ups basically for this year so far. So I thought what I would do today, instead of doing like individual ones, I think I've read 21 books so far this year, and what I thought I would do is to separate them into categories. So I have my worst books, the books I was most disappointed by, my favourite books, and then the ones I was most surprised by. And I thought we would talk through them and I could let you know how I felt about those books. And that way I don't have to talk about the ones that were a non-event. So let's get started with the books that were my least favourite so far in 2026. I don't actually keep the books that I have already read. Once I've read books, I tend to give them away or I tend to get rid of them in some way. So a lot of these books I don't actually own anymore. However, the first one is The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. I actually read this as a set of short stories, but I actually didn't really like any of the books in this series or in this set of books. Basically, Angela Carter has written a horror take on like classic fairy tales or like classic stories, and she's done many of that. She's done Beauty and the Beast, all different types. The Bloody Chamber being the title, the one that is kind of the main one in this series, in this book bind up. And The Bloody Chamber was I can't remember what the original story is, but it's basically where the main character gets married to a man, and on their wedding night she discovers, or he tells her that there's a room in the house that she can't go in. She obviously, spoiler alert, goes in the room and finds what happened to his ex-wives, let's put it that way, or his previous wives. Again, that's quite a familiar story, but this had its own like horror element to it. It was kind of gory, kind of gross, but I just didn't like the writing style in this. I found it quite wordy and just like unnecessarily wordy. It didn't really make any sense to me. So yeah, I did not enjoy this book series, unfortunately, or this set. And so yeah, I have got rid of it already, but yes, I did not enjoy this one. Then the second one that I'm actually really sad about, because I thought that I would enjoy this one, is Bunny by Mona Awad. I've heard so many things about this and I feel like everybody seems to like this series. Maybe it's a bit sort of hit and miss for people, I think, but it was definitely a miss for me. It basically follows our main character who goes, it's like a dark academia book. She goes to school with it's literally just her and this group of girls in the same class, and this group of girls call themselves the Bunnies. They literally call each other Bunny, like, hey Bunny, how you doing Bunny? And they all call each other Bunny, so it's quite confusing trying to figure out which one's which. And then the main character gets invited to a party at their place one night, and it's about what happens there. Now, I will say this was probably one of the most unhinged books I've read. It was very strange. There were some very interesting, weird things going on. And I'll be honest, I just didn't really understand the point. Or like, when I got to the end, I was kind of like, but why though? Like, I didn't really understand the point or the like reasoning behind it. So yeah, it really wasn't for me. And I just think sometimes I think books seem to be written just with like shock value. And then I won't talk about this one too much because I did actually read this on my first like welcome back vlog, so I'll link that below. But Everything by Nicola Yoon. This was a very stereotypical YA. It was written in 2015, so like it's very of its time. This follows our main character Maddie, who is allergic to the world. She hasn't left her house since she was like 4 months old, and like in order for people to come in the house they have to like be like purified, like air purified and stuff. And then next door a boy called Ollie moves in and she somehow falls for him, and then it's about him trying to save her and her trying to save him. And I just felt like this was so far-fetched. There was things that happened in this and I just was a bit like, I was a bit incredulous, I'm going to be honest. Yeah, it didn't make sense. And also there's a trope in this that I talked about in the vlog, how I was really hoping that it wasn't going to come true, and then sadly it did come true. So yeah, this was not the one for me. I'm glad I've read it though, because it has been on my shelf for 10 years, but yeah, it's definitely not one that I will be keeping. So those were my least favourite books of the year so far. Next though, I'm going to talk about the 3 books that I was most disappointed by. And by this I mean I was expecting to give them a high rating, and sadly I gave them quite a low one. So first up we have In a Dark Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. I've read other Ruth Ware books before and quite enjoyed them, but this basically follows Nora, who gets an invitation one day to her, like, I think she was her uni friend, like to her hen party, and she hasn't spoken to her or seen her in 10 years. So it's just really random and out of the blue that she's been invited to it. And something really bad goes wrong at the hen party. And it's kind of told in like mixed timelines. So you get like bits of now storyline and bits of like previously what happened when they were young, like when they were younger and when they did know each other. And I really wanted to love this one because, like I said, I've read other Ruth Ware books and I really enjoyed them. But there was just something about this one I felt really disconnected to, and it just really didn't do it for me. Also, I found the main character to be quite unlikable, and I don't necessarily think she was meant to be likable, but I just really couldn't connect to her, so therefore I didn't really care about what was happening or like the things that were happening. And I did just think to myself quite a few times, like, why would she not have just walked out at this point, like, or why would she even have gone in the first place? Like, I'm not being funny, if someone from 10 years ago in my life who I've not spoken to or seen since then asked me to go to the hen party, I don't think I'd go, no matter what the like history was. So yeah, it wasn't for me. Then we have another one that has a similar trope to the Everything Everything book, and that was The One Memory of Flora Banks by Emily Barr. I was really excited about this one. I sometimes enjoy books that have the sort of memory loss thing. I really enjoyed like Before I Go to Sleep. I've enjoyed quite a few, but this one just didn't work for me. Again, it's very YA, and I'll be honest with you, I'm reading a lot less YA these days, so potentially that was one of the things that didn't help. And again, this was just so far-fetched. This did not make any sense. The things that this girl did, basically it's about our main character who years and years ago was in an accident, has lost her short-term memory loss. So although she remembers before the accident, she doesn't remember any new memories. So every day she wakes up and she's being told like the things she likes, the things that she does, how she goes about her day-to-day life. She lives with her parents. And again, that trope that I was talking about in Everything Everything was also true in this one. And I don't like it. I really don't like it. Yeah, it's not for me. And I felt like this one, again, was really far-fetched. In fact, to be honest with you, they could be sister stories, those two. I think Everything Everything and The One Memory of Flora Banks are very, very similar. And they're also, I think, probably written around the same time, so it would kind of make sense. And then we have The Binding by Bridget Collins. This is a historical-esque, like, fantasy novel. Our main character basically gets hired as an apprentice to a binder, which basically is where they bind people's memories into a book to stop them from having those memories, or like, it's hard to explain. But I just, yeah, again, this one, I felt like it was like a 400 or 500 page book, but it felt like it went on forever. I felt like I was reading it for like years. And again, there was no like redeemable or redeeming characters. There was nobody in it that I was like, oh, I really like them. And like they would make me want to watch or like read it, should I say. So yeah, again, it just wasn't, I need to have some kind of likable or like some kind of quality that I can like cling to in characters, and unfortunately that one did not have any. Now on to the kind of positive half of this video. Let's talk about the books that I was surprised by. So these are books that maybe I didn't really think too much of and then ended up giving it quite a good star rating and quite enjoying myself. In that reading vlog, I also read this one. So again, I won't go into too much detail, but I read Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Bayron. I realised I was saying her name wrong in my previous video. But I was pleasantly surprised with this one. I think I said once I'd read the first like 100 pages that I was worried it was going to be that generic YA kind of fantasy novel, like very reality TV show. But after 100 pages, it changed into something quite different. this takes that kind of fairy tale and turns it on its head. So this follows our main character, Sophia, who lives in a world 200 years after Cinderella found her prince. And the royal family in this have essentially, or the prince has, or the descendant of the prince has basically taken the story and has used it to manipulate the kind of people, the general people, into following the rules, basically. So they have to recite the Cinderella story. The girls, when they hit 18, have to go to a kind of ball every year, and they have to be chosen by suitors, so by men within the village or within the town. Otherwise they are forfeit. So that means that they basically they're kind of cast out. They have to work in like really horrendous conditions. And our main character, Sophia, is in love with her best friend Erin, and she doesn't want to get married to a man. She is in love with a woman, and she is just not interested in that. And so she decides that they should run away. Erin is not really into the idea of that. She kind of wants to just like make her parents proud and do the things that she wants to do. So it ends up with a situation where Sophia ends up by herself, and it's about her figuring out the truth behind what has happened and about how she then goes about trying to effect change, so shall we say. And I really liked this book. As I said, I thought this was going to be quite surface level and I wasn't really sure about it, but the more I read this, the more I was really interested. I loved the relationship in this. I thought Sophia and Constance's relationship was beautiful, and I think it was just perfect the way that it was written. And although I think there was probably, it does suffer in part in kind of that YA, sometimes I feel like YA, I feel like I'm holding it at a distance and it doesn't quite connect with me fully. But this one I did think was surprising, and yeah, I really enjoyed when I did read it. I don't know if it's one of those ones that will stick with me forever, but it's definitely one that I enjoyed in the moment of reading. Next up, we have The Alibi Girl by C.J. Skews. I read Sweet Pea by C.J. Skews a few years ago and absolutely loved it. That one was about a female serial killer, and I loved the humour in it. And so I'll be honest, I was really sceptical that I was going to enjoy this one because I enjoyed that last one so much, and that one was part of a series. This being not part of that series and being a standalone, I was a bit concerned about how I was going to feel about it. However, I was pleasantly surprised that I really did enjoy this one. So this follows our main character, who goes by many different names in the book. In fact, I'm not even sure if I know what her actual name was in the end. Not sure if we're meant to know. Literally every element of her life has a different name. Where she works, there's a donut stand on the corner where she has a different persona. The grocery store man, she has a different persona. Like the man that lives upstairs in her flat, like there's so many different parts to her, and then she's trying to keep track of all that, and you kind of learn that there's maybe something that happened in her past that has meant that she's kind of worried that someone's following her, so there's this almost paranoia. And I will say that throughout this book, I felt like I was on edge reading it. I felt like I was constantly waiting for something to figure out where, who was following her, and kind of figuring out which person in her life was that kind of darkness or whatever. And I'll be honest, I was shocked by the ending of this one. I did not see it coming, and I do often kind of figure them out, but this one I didn't see it coming, and I really love it when books can do that for me. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Again, it wasn't my favourite book I've ever read, and I definitely preferred Sweet Pea to this one. However, this one was very good in its own right. Next up, a very different book, we have Forest Mage by Robin Hobb. This is the second book in the Soldier Son series, and this, I don't know what it was about this book, but I really enjoyed it. It is again the sequel to, I can't remember what the first one was called actually. Shaman's Crossing? I may have made that up. Anyway, whatever the first one's called, this is the sequel to it, and I really enjoy it. It follows our main character, Navarre Bevelle, and Navarre is kind of he's trying to be live up to his family's expectations. He's trying to be this kind of soldier son, basically within this world, depending on which like member of your family you are. He's the second son, so he's the soldier son, so he kind of is the one that's going to have to become a soldier and go and fight for his family and that. And that's not necessarily who he wants to be or like feels like he should be, but he doesn't really have a choice, and it's about that, and it kind of follows on from that. This has a lot of like magic in it, and yeah, I just really enjoyed it. It was really atmospheric, really interesting to read. I definitely think it's one that is not really talked about so much about Robin Hobb. I feel like her other series are kind of much more talked about, but I decided to read this one first, and then I will go on to some other books by her. But yeah, I fully enjoyed this one, and I'm hopeful that I would like some of the others that I've read, or that I've heard of in her series as well. And then the last 3 books I have are my favourite books of the year so far. So in third place we have How to Kill Your Best Friend by Lexi Elliott. This follows 3 girls, or 3 women, and they have been best friends for a long time. They're all part of the same swimming club, and they all like know each other really well. They're really like best friends. And one day Lissa drowns off like on an island. Basically, they've got, her and her husband have got a property or like a hotel on this island, and she drowns essentially, and then Georgie was not there at the time. She goes to the island to the kind of funeral wake, and she meets up with all of the other there's kind of a big cast of characters, and her and Bronwyn, who's was also one of Lissa's best friends, they start to think that maybe there's more to this. Things start to happen, you know, they get messages written on mirrors and envelopes given to them and things like that, and they start to think that maybe things are not quite as they seem. You know, the questions are, is she actually dead? And if she is actually dead, maybe somebody actually killed her. And yeah, so it's a really interesting story. Again, this had a twist in it that I really enjoyed, and I actually read this one at the airport, and it just gave me like, in fact, a lady stopped me. I was sat in the airport reading it, and the lady walked over to me to ask me what I was reading, which I always find really interesting, and I told her about it, and then she kind of was like, oh, interesting, and like, I might want to read that. And then she looked around and she was like, I noticed your best friend's not with you. And I thought, might have killed her off. No, obviously joking. But yeah, it was just like a funny interaction. But yeah, I really enjoyed the book. I would highly recommend reading it. Then we have Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree, and I absolutely love this series. I'll be honest, when I first read Legends and Lattes, which is the first book in the series, Bookshops and Bone Dust is kind of the prequel. When I first started reading Legends and Lattes, I got like 50 pages in, and I actually initially DNF'd it. I was not feeling it at all. And then I thought, I might just give it another go. And I'm so glad I did, because I think I just wasn't in the right mood or like the right headspace for it initially, because when I reread it, I absolutely loved it. And the prequel was just as good, if not better. This follows Viv, who is a mercenary. She's an orc, and she is injured at the start of this one, and she ends up going for like respite in this sort of small town, where she meets Fern, who owns a bookshop, and essentially she helps her with a few odd jobs here and there, and then they essentially set up a bookshop. The actual first one, Legends and Lattes, is about them setting up a coffee shop, and I just love the fact that it's like a fantasy novel, but set in such like a comforting, you know, place that we all know. And yeah, I just really loved this. There wasn't loads of action in this. It's not kind of really fast paced, but it's just exactly the kind of cozy read that I was looking for. So yeah, highly recommend this one. And then last but not least, I think this might be my favourite book so far this year, and I'm really excited to read the next one in the series. This is It's a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the first book in the Brown Sister trilogy, and each one of them follows one of the Brown sisters. So there are 3. This one is about Chloe. Chloe is a computer geek, essentially, who is chronically ill. And I love the representation of the chronically ill side of this. She has, I believe she has fibromyalgia, and I actually, my mum has fibromyalgia, so I felt like this was probably the first time I've ever seen representation of that sort in a romance book. Like, I think this was really good. But basically, she writes her get a life list, and it's basically the things that she really wants to do, like ride a motorbike, go camping, and she doesn't really know how she's gonna like figure those things out. And then she meets Redford Morgan, aka Red, and I think Red is one of my favourite book boyfriends. I just really enjoyed reading about him. This book is also incredibly spicy. There's a lot of sexy scenes in there, shall we say, and I very much enjoyed them. It is maybe one I wouldn't necessarily read while I was just like sat in public, just because it's slightly awkward. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think that, again, I love the representation in this. I love the fact that Chloe Brown is a bigger girl, and I just think how amazing and how like romantic, and it's also very funny as well. So yeah, I would highly recommend this. This is probably my favourite book of the year, and I'm really looking forward to getting to the second one, which I think is called Take a Hint, Danny Brown. And I do own that one, so hopefully I shall be getting to that very soon. But there you are, guys. That is my favourite, least favourite, most surprising, most disappointing books so far of 2026. I cannot wait to read more books and talk more about them later on. But for now, that's all I have to talk to you about today. Let me know what why don't you let me know what your favourite book so far of the year has been? And give me a thumbs up if you've enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.